And all of this is happening when a political newcomer, Ali al-Zaidi, is trying to form a government and manage these deep political tensions.
Exactly. This may be one of the most difficult moments that an Iraqi prime minister has inherited since 2014.
Today is May 22nd, Friday, day 84 of the war on Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed. It is 7 p.m. in Baghdad. Welcome to your Iraq briefing. I'm Erik Gustafson with Enabling Peace in Iraq Center. I'm joined by my colleague Omar Al-Nidawi. Any plans for the long weekend?
I was hoping to grill and have friends over, but we're getting rained on.
Yes, we are. We are here in the DC area. All right, so let's get into it. A lot to discuss. Now that Prime Minister Ali Al-Zaidi has partially formed his cabinet, what stands out in terms of who secured key ministries, which portfolios remain unresolved, and what these negotiations reveal about the balance of power within Iraq's political system?
Okay, so this was a partially formed cabinet of 14 ministers, and there are 9 other ministers that have not been confirmed. You can see if you look at the list, which we have at our latest editions of the Iraq Security and Humanitarian Monitor, that the some of the missing portfolios that have not been filled yet include key positions like Minister of Defense and Minister of Interior, Minister of Planning. And the idea is that the vote or the negotiations are going to continue over the next few weeks, and potentially there will be a second vote to complete the cabinet formation after the Eid holiday, which starts next Tuesday. I think in terms of the nature of this cabinet, you will see that from the names that there's no overt presence of Iran-backed militias in the list. There are, however, some names that have raised eyebrows, and definitely names that are, not directly are militia figures, but are quite militia adjacent. And I think some of the names that have, caused such reactions are Mustafa Sanad in the telecommunications or communications portfolio. He's a figure who's seen as, you know, on paper is named a claims to be an independent, but is really deeply involved in the coordination framework, has been seen and photographed in meetings with Ismail Qaani, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, and he's very, very, very representative, I think, of the more hardliner Iran-backed side of the coordination framework. And his position in telecommunications, I think, is going to be problematic, I think, for the sector and for the business potential of it. I think another name that has raised eyebrows is Ali Saadi Uhayb, who is the new minister for electricity. Ali is the son of the of a important businessman in Iraq who has very strong ties to former Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, but also to former Prime Minister Mohammed al-Sudani, and his company Rabban al-Safina has enormous contracts in the gas, oil, and electricity sectors. So that has raised a lot of, I think, questions about conflicts of interest and the dominance of these business conglomerates or business empires in the next cabinet. So these are, I think, some of the names that have raised eyebrows among the 14. We also see that there were 2 incumbents who retained their positions from the previous cabinet. That's Justice Minister Khalid Shwani from the PK and Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein from the KDP. The vote itself was controversial, problematic. There were altercations among groups of MPs, among the various blocks. There were a lot of objections about the way that the speaker managed the session, and the blocks that had some of their candidates blocked during the vote are actually quite upset. And at the top of the list comes Noor al-Maliki and his State of Law coalition and the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP. So, all in all, it's a it's an incomplete cabinet. It's starting with a lot of recriminations among the ruling parties and missing a lot of the key portfolios, some of which are being filled on an acting basis and by the prime minister.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you were mentioning how there's ties to various business conglomerates and the ongoing corruption, the grift going on between the government and the private sector. Also, it seems that we see this recurrence of, these political parties almost becoming these family dynasties. So I'm thinking like with the Ministry of Environment, Sarwa Abdul Wahid from one of the opposition parties, that's the new generation out of the Kurdistan region. And she's like the sister of the head of that party.
Correct. Yeah, and I think it also reflects the new forged alliance between the PUK and the new generation, because this is a post that had been held by the PUK in the past. I think the president of Iraq, Nizar Hamidi, was the Minister of Environment before he stepped down to in preparation for his quest to become the next president. That is part of the alignments that are kind of shaping this government, with kind of two camps forming, with one including the PUK, New Generation, Sudanese Reconstruction and Development Coalition, and Asaba al-Haq, of course, the Hikmah movement of Omar al-Hakim. On the other side, you have the disgruntled KDP and Noor al-Maliki, and some of the groups that have splintered from Sudanese coalition.
That's a good segue into my next question. The cabinet vote appears to have intensified tensions between these major political camps, as you were just describing, including the emerging effort to try to unseat Speaker Mohammed al Habousi. How stable does the current governing arrangement look so early in the beginning of al Zaidi's tenure?
It does look quite shady. Sorry, shady. It is shady, but it's also sorry. Um,
You should
I'm gonna
keep that
cut
in.
this probably. The ruling coalition does look shaky from the outside, but I mean, on the other hand, in reality, once a prime minister is seated, it is very difficult for a ruling coalition to fully collapse, or for a government to collapse. And Nur al-Maliki knows this firsthand when during his second term. Yeah, I think like the pressure on Halbusi is probably more of a pressure tactic meant to encourage cooperation and making sure that the candidates of these groups, these Nur al-Maliki, State of Law, and the KDP, get their fair share in the next, when the next vote happens. It's, I think, quite unlikely that there will be a move to try and completely exclude these parties from government. That's not how muhassasa in its current form works. It requires that cooperation, and I don't think the uh, the camp that has the upper hand right now. I forget to mention, on that side is also the Taqaddum party of Halbusi. I don't think that side is going to try and really rock the boat and cause a major confrontation with the other side. But this is transactional politics, so it depends on what they're going to get out of it in order to give the KDP, give Maliki, and give the Azim coalition, which is the Sunni party that rivals the Taqaddum party. It's going to depend on what they're going to get in return for giving these parties the portfolios that they seek. But again, I think the government itself is going to be stable, and we have seen also from recent past experience that the replacement of a speaker does not really mean necessarily that the ruling coalition is going to collapse. We saw, Halbusi's cousin, Muhammad al-Halbusi, replaced in 2023. That was a period of, I think, some political turbulence, but everyone who was involved in that conflict is still, is still in
Politics.
the game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it shows
And
the resilience of the system, I think,
and
for
and
better or worse.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And there are still some pretty serious portfolios, ministries that are vacant.
Yeah, yeah. Defense, interior, planning, higher education, as well as labor and migration and the displaced. So, all in all, I think 9 portfolios that have not been filled.
Well, so this new government is taking shape amid unusually direct pressure from Washington. In fact, just what we were talking about seems like these are some perhaps even cosmetic efforts underway to appease the Trump administration. There's been some public support from President Trump for al-Zaidi, uh, the designation of al-Zaidi as the new prime minister. But there's also these renewed US demands regarding armed factions within the Iraqi government. How are Iraqi political actors navigating this mix of external pressure and the internal political realities that they're navigating?
I think it reflects an approach where these targeted groups, the militias, are trying to keep their head down and also find a way around the pressure to kind of neutralize it and stay in the game. Let's not forget that a lot of what's at stake here is economic interests and financial interests and patronage networks, and those don't necessarily require a having the minister be from your group in order to maintain. You can uh, manipulate a lot of levers of power within ministries at lower levels, the deputy ministers, director generals, even heads of departments and offices, to maintain your influence and power and defend your interests and contracts and patronage networks. You don't really have to stick your neck out to protect those interests. So I think there is an adaptation in terms of not being very overtly present in the cabinet, and we're seeing, I think, this rise of we talked about it briefly earlier, businesses that are representing and protecting the interests of the ruling elite in a rather indirect way. So that seems to be the situation. Try to keep a distance, but also have your instruments remotely managing things within government, but not so remotely, even just like one step removed. Um, Interesting visit by General Petraeus, who
Mm.
knows Iraq very well and has a long history in the country. It has raised a lot of speculation about, what is this about? People in Iraq are thinking, there's probably a chance that Petraeus is going to be the next czar for Iraq at the White House. But I think there's also a lot of misconceptions about the role of a private citizen in and what they can play, what role they can play in government and policy. But regardless, I think it's very interesting to see General Petraeus in Baghdad because he knows the country very well. He has deep knowledge and insight about the political situation in Iraq and about the militias and about Iran's role. And whether he's an envoy, a messenger, or simply someone who's sipping tea with the prime minister and exchanging thoughts, I think he brings a lot of weight and authority when he says something. I think one of the interesting things that may have leaked from those conversations is the idea of a unified Ministry of Federal Security. That may have been a concept that was floated during those conversations. Basically, a new security agency that would put together all of those oddballs, the PMF, the federal police, the even the counterterrorism service. Some people even say the Peshmerga. Everything that is nominally under the command of the commander in chief, but practically outside the control of the commander in chief, would come under the umbrella of this ministry to try and weaken these security agencies' ties to the to the people who actually pull the strings right now and build or extend new strings to the office of the commander in chief. Again, there's a lot of speculation about this, but that's what people are talking about right now in Baghdad.
Interesting, interesting. And I mean, the advantage, of course, with David Petraeus pushing this pressure to keep armed factions out of the government, he's the kind of guy that would actually see through things. You can't do
Yeah,
cosmetic,
yeah,
superficial things with David Petraeus. So
exactly. Yeah, he's not to be fooled easily.
yeah. So Ali al-Zaidi is taking office during what may be one of Iraq's most difficult economic and service crises in years. Oil exports have collapsed. Revenues are under severe strain. I mean, they're digging into reserves. Electricity shortages are expected to worsen this summer, as well as, of course, shortage of the gas needed to generate that electricity. And public frustrations over jobs and basic services are rising again. How serious is the situation this new government is inheriting?
It's getting worse and worse. If you look at the oil export data, things actually were worse in April after the ceasefire than they were in March. So in February, the month before the war, Iraq exported just over 3.5 million barrels per day. That figure dropped to 600,000 barrels per day in March and dropped further to 325,000 barrels per day in April. And it's not really showing much improvement in May. So far, only about 5 tankers may have exited the Strait of Hormuz loaded with Iraqi fuel, with Iraqi crude oil. It's not exactly clear what capacities they have, but it seems very likely that the month of May, is going to be just as bad as April was, or maybe marginally better. But in any case, Iraq is exporting only about a tenth of what it did before the war. Revenue in April was just $1 billion compared to about 7 billion in February. So the gap between revenue and obligations and expenditure is growing at a terrifying rate, and I think Iraq's financial cash reserves are going to run out soon. There are serious, I think, concerns that the government might not be able to pay salaries within the next, month or two at most, if the situation remains as it is. Even you look at Iraq's exports by truck to Jordan, which used to run about 15,000 barrels per day before the war, which is not really a lot of volume, but it's something. It's a trade relation that has actually been halted for 4 months now, reportedly over some memorandum of understanding about the pricing mechanism. But really, I think what's behind that is a militia objection to trading with Jordan because they see Jordan as a hostile state that has been serving as a base for American reconnaissance and airstrikes against the militias against Iran, and so they want to punish Jordan for that role in the conflict, and but by doing that they also actually punish Iraq. Again, it's a small amount, but a small amount is better than nothing. That's the kind of situation we're seeing in terms of the oil exports. You mentioned electricity. Yeah, I mean the when oil production is shut in, it means also your gas production is severely reduced. Iraq has been receiving smaller volumes of gas from Iran. I think the bigger hit that we saw in last couple of weeks was that a um, a platform that Iraq had commissioned to that would be basically a floating platform docked at the ports of Basra to receive and regasify LNG, liquefied natural gas, has been diverted to service another contract because, well, the ports of Basra are not, able to receive the platform and the other infrastructure that's necessary to accommodate it and to commence operations. So at least a 9 month delay in that platform, which was going to support about 750 million cubic feet of gas per day, which is a lot of gas for power plants. So the gap between supply and demand in power generation and demand for electricity is probably going to skyrocket this coming summer season.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's going to be quite serious. And so this is the LNG platform. Instead of servicing a contract in Basra where it would have to go through the Strait of Hormuz, apparently it's now going to be servicing a contract in Jordan on the other side. So they
Yes.
don't have to go through the strait. So yeah, I mean, this is a very serious problem. And you're mentioning all of this. I mean, this is happening while there were protests just this past week in Baghdad among new graduates not having jobs. So,
Yes.
just even in good conditions, the Iraqi government is struggling to meet the needs of the population and meet those expectations of new graduates. Now it's just getting so much worse. Over the past several weeks, we've seen reports of foreign military actively inside Iraq. I mean, just listeners and viewers, just imagine that for a minute. If here in the United States we had a foreign military establishing a base within our territory and operating from within our territory. This was Israel. Israel had a base in a remote area in Karbala governorate, I believe. There's been also cross-border strikes once again, coming from Iran against Iranian Kurdish opposition groups within Iraqi Kurdistan. There's been drone attacks launched from Iraqi territory, uh, from militias against Gulf states. What do these developments reveal about Iraq's ongoing position in this broader regional conflict and about the state's ability to enforce its own sovereignty?
I think it shows deep weakness towards both external foes and internal, let's call them usurpers of authority. Yeah, I mean, what you were referring to, Israel apparently established two outposts within Iraq in the desert just southwest of Najaf and Karbala, really not far from major population centers. We're talking like, 50, 60 miles away. And we're able to support operations against Iran during the conflict. And some of the preparations to set up these outposts may have gone back for months. And there was an incident in March when Iraqi troops were alerted to that presence. They tried to investigate and they were shot at and were told basically to stay back. Uh, in a way, it's very ironic because the Iran-backed militias for since 23 have been launching and bragging about launching strikes against Israel, but when Israel set up a base on their doorstep just outside Najaf, they couldn't do anything about it, and it shows, I think, the disconnect between the rhetoric and the capability and what they really want to do here. The more concerning, perhaps, part, and I mean, of course, that is very concerning because Israel and Iraq are legally are still at a state of war, but also the damage that's being done to Iraq's relations with its Arab neighbors, the Gulf states. There were multiple drone attacks launched against Saudi Arabia and the UAE, including one that hit very close to the UAE's nuclear power plant and setting up a fire. And those were, according to Saudi and Emirati authorities, those were launched from Iraqi territory. Iraq denies that, but it's definitely ratcheting up the tensions between Iraq and its neighbors. Saudi Arabia um, kind of threatened to retaliate. They said they will reserve the right to respond at a time and place of their choosing. And this is a kind of language that really does not bode well for Iraq's relationships with its neighbors. These relationships that took more than a decade to rebuild in over the last, since 2015, 2016, after a very, very cold decade between Iraq and its Arab neighbors. So that's a very, very concerning situation right now. And again, really, it shows that the government in Baghdad still does not control the um, really facing an uphill battle trying to establish control over decisions of war and peace. And this is going to be, I think, its primary challenge in proving that it can make some progress there. Otherwise, this is going to be extremely destabilizing.
Well, yeah, and I remember reading in just a recent issue about how Saudi Arabia has retaliated, and it was confirmed to have carried out an attack back at one of the militias in Iraqi territory.
Yeah, and the difference I think here is that was rather done kind of under the table or like hush hush. It was revealed later, but what we could be seeing in the future is more open hostility and more overt operations by Saudi Arabia or other Gulf states to engage basically in open war with the militias to neutralize that threat, and that's going to be, I think, an order of magnitude more, worse than these rather covert operations.
Yeah, yeah. So that mercurial figure in Iraqi politics is back. Muqtada al-Sadr has re-entered the conversation, congratulating Ali al-Zaidi, while also making a public call for armed factions to come fully under state authority. He's even suggested that the all of these militias should become humanitarian organizations and give up their arms. How do you interpret Sadr's positioning right now, and what role could he play in shaping the next phase of Iraqi politics, if any?
Yeah, I mean, despite Sutter's assertion that he's out of politics, he's never really out of politics. He's always, doing something in the background. But I think what is motivating him to engage more actively right now is he sees this mounting pressure on the militias and this mounting pressure on the government to push for disarmament. And I think Sutter sees an opportunity in that to level the playing field and contribute more pressure on his rivals. We should not forget the August 2022 clashes between Sadr's militias and those that are loyal to the coordination framework that were decisive, I think, in cementing the power of the coordination framework and led to Sadr's kind of stepping away from politics, from active engagement in politics. But I think it showed Sutter that he did not have the upper hand when it comes to military power. But he does have a much more organized grassroots network in Iraq, and he has the potential in a level playing field to outplay the coordination framework factions. So disarmament favors the weak, I think, is the concept at play here. And when Slaughter sees that there's an opportunity and some momentum towards disarming his rivals, that if he disarms too, he comes out on top. And I think that's probably part of the motivation for him to return to the scene and try to say his 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And just a quick note about disarming. In Isham 540, there was the report that you included about on April 28th, security forces raided the home of Ishmael Hafid al-Lami, aka Abu Dara, who is a notorious figure. Many will know that name during the 2006-2007 civil war in Iraq. Implicated in a lot of sectarian killings. But his home was raided, and they found all kinds of weapons and munitions. And this is a guy that's connected to Soraya al-Salam, who's a militia that is affiliated with Muqtada al-Sadr. So yeah, there's plenty of disarming that also needs to happen in his own house.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Sutter the other day, he, obviously he acknowledges his Saraya Salam, which is a huge organization, but he also reminded, I think, everyone that he also has his Promised Day Brigade, which is the considered like the elite force within his militia. It was one of the original special groups that were operating in Iraq during and after the first civil war. So yeah, there's plenty of skeletons everywhere, I think, and plenty of disarmament. It's just about the What the point I was trying to make is that there is a relative imbalance in power, with Sutter being the underdog here. So when you're the underdog, if your rivals disarm, you're happy to disarm, and having the better political organization, it's a net gain for him.
Yeah, 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 and we did certainly see that in the past election. What was the election when he had the best turnout? It was 20 was that
In
that was the
2021,
2022, 2021.
he won the most votes. He won the most seats with 73.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
50% more than Sudani got this time.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Omar. That was fantastic. Couple shout outs that we need to make. We're excited. Much of your own labor, Omar. We have the Arabic edition of our groundbreaking report on drip irrigation. We'll make sure we include a link right there and also in the show notes. Also, a shout out about your recent brief that you did on Iraq's oil export crisis and what has precipitated that. Just not carrying out better policies much sooner when it was recognized that this would be a problem. So we also have that available for everybody. You can find, of course, all the latest issues. We are talking about the new cabinet being formed. You can actually see the list in issue, I think that's 542. So just head to our website at enablingpeace.org. That's it for this show. Thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the long Memorial Day weekend, everybody. Masalama.
Assalamu.